He didn't cry when the raiders burned his family alive. He didn't break when the grave swallowed his last kin. But when he saw her, bloody, barefoot, and alone in the dust, something in him stirred. Not pity, not guilt. Something older, something stronger. A vow he never thought he'd make again. No one dies alone. Silas Kane had been alone for 3 winters. Not the kind of alone where folks leave you be. This was empty alone. The kind where the wind talks louder than your voice ever could, and the cold nights feel like penance carved into bone. He'd built his cabin with that silence in mind, tucked in a stretch of Arizona territory where even coyotes kept their distance. He ran trap lines, fixed fence posts, ate beans straight from the tin. And most days, that was enough. Because it meant no one asked about the fire, about Jonas and Eliza, about the Kane family grave he'd dug with his own 2 hands. But that morning, something shifted. The sun beat down on the rocks above the old mining shaft. Useless ground these days, nothing but splinters and rust. Silas crouched to reset a sprung trap when the sound hit him. Sharp, high, human, a child crying, not a tantrum, not some settler's brat lost from the wagon train. No, this was raw, broken sound, the kind that pulled a man's gut tight. Silas froze. His hand drifted to his revolver. The desert didn't give second chances. He moved slow, boots crunching gravel, body coiled like a spring. And there, just past the collapsed mine entrance, he saw her. A girl. Apache. Couldn't be more than 10 or 11. Tangled black hair. Dirt smeared up her face like paint. One leg bent wrong, like it didn't belong to her anymore. Her lips were cracked. Her ribs showed clear through the cotton of her torn tunic. She looked up at him with that same look he'd once worn in the mirror. That hollow, dead-eyed fear that don't scream or beg. It expects to be left behind. He holstered his Colt slow, kneeling down just enough to let the rifle fall harmlessly to the dust. "I ain't gonna hurt you," he said, voice low, steady as creek water. She flinched anyway, tried to scoot back on her elbows, but pain curled her like paper in fire. She hadn't eaten in days. That much was clear. Silas took a strip of jerky from his satchel and laid it on a flat stone between them. Not a word, just waited. After a moment, she grabbed it, devoured it in panicked bites. "What's your name?" he asked. Her lips barely moved. "Tala." She pointed to the mine. "You go in there?" he asked. She shook her head, tears welling, then nodded. Like even she didn't know anymore. He followed her gaze and saw the fresh collapse. No one made it through that. Silas didn't need to ask more. He knew the signs. Raiders, maybe soldiers. Same kind that took his folks. He tore his shirt tail, wrapped her twisted ankle tight. She bit her lip to keep from crying. Watched his hands like they held the key to the whole world. When he lifted her, she didn't weigh more than a sack of kindling. She didn't speak, just clung to his shirt like it was the last thread tying her to this world. His horse, Dusty, stood waiting where he'd left him. Patient as always. Silas mounted up with her in his arms, settling her against his chest. Her head fell against him, not out of comfort, but exhaustion. Halfway back to the ranch, her voice broke the silence. "You think he'll come back? My pa?" Silas didn't answer right away, just watched the horizon, let the saddle rock the truth loose from his gut. "You're strong," he said. "Stronger than you know." Then, in a voice he barely recognized as his own, he added, "You grow up tough enough, I'll marry you someday." It was meant as a joke, but she went still. And then, a sound he hadn't heard in a long while, a shy, breathless laugh, That night, he laid her on fresh blankets in the barn, lit a lamp, sat nearby, close enough so she knew she wasn't alone. And when she finally slept, Silas kept his eyes on the door, hand on the grip of his Colt. Coyotes howled somewhere out past the ridge. But inside the barn, for the first time in a long time, someone needed him. And needing, well, that was the first step toward living again. Closing CTA. If that first spark of trust between Silas and Tala hit your heart, don't ride off just yet. Subscribe now so you don't miss the rest of their journey through fire, blood, and the unforgiving land that shapes them. Because in the Wild West, family ain't always born, it's forged. The ride back to the ranch was long and silent. Tala didn't speak, but Silas could feel her heartbeat against his chest. Uneven, guarded, like she was trying not to take up space, afraid this kindness might vanish if she breathed too loud. The sun was low by the time they rode into the back lot. Silas eased her down gently, keeping his voice steady. "We'll start with rest. That's all you need to think about." He carried her straight past the barn and toward the bunkhouse, but a sharp voice stopped him cold. "Silas." Amos Croft stood on the porch, arms crossed, mouth drawn tight. The old rancher had a face like dry leather and a tongue rougher still. He'd taken Silas in after the raid, gave him work when no one else would. But sympathy didn't run deep with Amos, and trust ran even thinner. "What in God's name is that?" Amos asked, eyes fixed on the girl in Silas's arms. "She's a child," Silas said flatly. "Injured, hungry." "And Apache," Amos growled. "You know what hell that brings, son? If raiders come sniffing?" "She stays," Silas said, cutting him off. Amos blinked. Silas never interrupted him, never talked back. But there it was, plain and immovable. A new weight in the younger man's voice, like iron set to boil. Amos muttered a curse under his breath, spit tobacco to the dirt. "Then you'd best keep her out of sight, and pray those hills stay quiet." Silas carried Tala into the barn instead, setting her down on a pile of clean blankets in the hayloft. He gave her water, then sat down close, but not too close, letting her breathe. Only when her eyes began to close did he speak again, so soft it barely counted as sound. "You're safe now." But the words hung heavy in his chest, because he didn't know if they were true. At dawn, he rode east, left Tala with jerky and a canteen, and told her not to leave the barn unless she heard his whistle. She nodded, silent, watchful, and didn't ask questions. Silas followed her trail, past the mine, and into the low hills. The ground was dry and the signs faint, but he could read the story clear as if it were ink on a page. 3 camps, one burnt out, another torn to pieces, scattered footprints, blood, drag marks. And then, nothing. The tracks vanished into hard stone and silence. He stared out across the ridge, every muscle drawn tight. No sign of Taza, no sign of Elu, no sign of hope. He came back before the sun reached its peak. The barn smelled of horses and dust. Tala sat in the hay, hands in her lap, face pointed toward the door like she'd been listening for him the whole time. He dismounted, walked in slow, and crouched beside her. "I found the camp," he said, "but no one there." Her shoulders didn't shake. She didn't cry. She just looked away, jaw tight, lips trembling. "They might have gotten away," he added. "Could be halfway to safety by now." It wasn't a lie. It wasn't truth either. Just a thread of maybe, strong enough to keep her upright. By afternoon, Silas brought her outside on a makeshift crutch, a pine board with rope for a grip. She hobbled along beside him as he mended the fence, silent, eyes always scanning. She handed him nails, held a post steady with her good foot. Didn't complain once. He watched her, noticed the way she studied each movement, like she was learning not just how to work, but how to stay, how to be useful, so no one would send her away. "You don't have to earn a place here," he said gruffly, not looking at her. "You already got one." She blinked, unsure how to answer, but she didn't look away. That night, the wind picked up, cold and dry, rattling the shutters and whistling through the cracks in the barn. Silas sat across from her near the lantern, rubbing oil into his rifle stock. She clutched her blanket tighter. "Are they coming?" she asked, voice barely a whisper. Silas didn't answer right away. He looked her square in the eye and said it plain. "If they do, they won't touch you. Not while I'm breathing." Tala stared at him a moment. Then slowly, carefully, she reached for the knife hanging from his belt. "Teach me," she said, "so I'm not helpless next time." Silas nodded once, solemn. No lecture, no soft words, just the quiet understanding between two souls that had already lost too much. He handed her the blade. But first, they practiced by lamplight. Grip, stance, how to hold steady, not shake, how to breathe before the strike. She listened like her life depended on it, because it did. When she finally lay down to sleep, she did so with the knife beside her, wrapped in cloth like a talisman. Silas stayed awake long into the night, one hand on his revolver, the other on a promise that weighed more than any vow he'd ever made. Because he'd seen it in her eyes now. Not just the fear, but the fire. And he knew, if this land wanted to hurt her again, it'd have to come through him first. It started with a knock at the barn door. Sharp. 3 times. Not a stranger's knock, but one that carried weight. Silas Kane stood slow from the workbench where he'd been oiling the hinges of his trap rifle. Tala looked up from the floor where she'd been stitching a patch onto one of his old shirts. Her eyes narrowed, shoulders tense. He opened the door just a crack. It was Amos Croft, face drawn tight. "Sheriff Vance came by," the old man said without preamble. "He wants a word." Silas nodded, slipped his revolver into his waistband, and stepped outside. He didn't need to be told what it was about. Sheriff Vance was waiting at the edge of the fence line, hat pulled low, eyes scanning the horizon like they expected trouble to ride in on the wind. "You took in a girl," the sheriff said. No greeting, just truth laid bare. "Apache." "She was hurt," Silas replied. "Alone. She still is. And now she's here. With you." The 2 men locked eyes. Neither flinched. "There's talk," the sheriff went on, "about Slade Maddox and his crew. Rumors say they're moving through the southern ridge. Same route they used last spring when they torched that settler wagon train near Dry Fork." Silas stiffened. That was a name that turned folks' stomachs. "He's looking for something," the sheriff added, voice low. "And I got reason to believe it's that girl, or what she might be carrying." Silas didn't blink. "She ain't going nowhere." Vance studied him a moment, then gave a slight nod. "Didn't figure you'd say otherwise, but you best move her out of the barn. It's too exposed. If Maddox comes, he'll come hard. Already thought of that." Back at the ranch, Silas helped Tala hobble across the back pasture, past the horse shed, and toward the one-room cabin he'd built last fall. A place he'd meant to use for storing tools, maybe living in one day when the ghosts grew quiet. Now, it would serve another purpose. The air was hot, dry. Buzzards circled high above, lazy and slow. But even the birds felt wrong today. Restless. Inside the cabin, Tala looked around, running her fingers across the raw log walls, the single cot, the tiny stove. "This yours?" she asked. "It's yours now," he answered. She turned to him, eyes dark and uncertain. "Are you scared of them? The men who are coming?" Silas gave a grim smile. "I'm scared of letting you get hurt. That's different." She didn't answer, just sat down on the cot, her hand brushing the edge of the Colt he'd placed within reach. For the first time, she didn't look like a child waiting to be rescued. She looked like someone preparing to stand. That night, the first howl came from the ridge. Not a coyote, not a wolf, a man, a signal. Silas was on his feet before the sound faded, rifle loaded, lantern doused. He checked the door, the windows, every nail in the wall. Outside, the stars were thick. But there was movement in the dark. Shadows that didn't belong. Watching. Waiting. Tala stood behind him, silent. Her breath even, her hands steady on the revolver. "You remember what I told you?" Silas asked, voice low. "Shoot only if you have to," she whispered. He nodded. "And if they get through me?" "They won't," she cut in. Firm. No hesitation. He turned then, looked at her, and something in his chest twisted. This wasn't the broken girl from the mine anymore. This was someone forged by loss, and now sharpened by resolve. The next morning came heavy with dust and silence. Amos rode in at dawn, his face pale. "There's smoke near the southern ridge," he said. "A campfire. Big one." "How many?" Silas asked. Couldn't tell, but enough to make the horses skittish. Tala stood behind the cabin door, listening. "They're watching," she said. "I can feel it." Silas believed her. That day, he moved her things into the cabin proper. Blankets, food, water, his second rifle. Reinforced the door with timber. Dug trenches along the back path. Every move he made was careful, practiced, cold. He wasn't just preparing for an attack. He was preparing for the attack. Tala helped where she could, even with her limp. Every time her ankle gave out, she just gritted her teeth and kept going. No complaints, no fear, just fire. That evening, after the wind died and the ranch dipped into golden quiet, she sat beside him on the porch steps. "I used to think I was just unlucky," she said, watching the sunset. "That I lost my family because I wasn't strong enough to fight." "You were a child," Silas replied. "I'm not anymore." He didn't say a word. She leaned her head gently against his shoulder, and for a long moment, neither of them moved. The ridge was quiet, but Silas knew that peace in the West never lasted long. Not when there were men like Slade Maddox riding the same dirt, and not when a vow, spoken or silent, was about to be tested. By the second night in the cabin, the quiet between Silas and Tala wasn't silence. It was trust. She no longer jumped at every creak of wood or distant coyote cry. She moved through the room like she belonged there. And in a way, she did. She didn't ask where he slept, just pointed to the corner and said, "You take the bed tonight." He didn't argue. They both knew he wouldn't. Instead, he stayed by the window, rifle balanced across his knees, listening to the wind whisper stories only he could hear. Stories he didn't want to remember. The next morning, rain fell. Light, cold, steady. It was the kind that soaked into your bones without raising a fuss. Silas hated it. Not for the wet, but for the way it brought everything up from the past. And that morning, it brought up her. Tala sat by the stove, warming her fingers over the crackling flame. Her ankle was healing well. She could hobble now without the crutch, though Silas still made her rest more than she liked. "You always been alone out here?" she asked, watching the fire instead of him. He didn't answer right away. "No," he finally said. "I had folks. Once." She waited, sensing there was more. Silas stood, walked to the shelf, and pulled something from behind the lamp. A photograph, edges curled from time. He wiped the glass with the edge of his shirt and handed it to her. Tala studied it. A younger Silas stood between a woman and a man. The woman had gentle eyes. The man looked like granite. "Jonas and Eliza Kane," Silas said, voice tight. "My parents." "What happened?" He sat down slow, like the weight of the years had come back all at once. "Raiders," he said simply. "Same kind that are hunting you now. Slade Maddox's sort. They hit our homestead at dusk. I was off checking the trap line. Came back to smoke and silence." Tala swallowed hard. "And you?" "I buried what was left. Took my father's rifle. Rode till the pain got quiet enough to carry." She held the photo with both hands, careful not to smudge the faces. "You never told anyone that?" "Didn't have reason to." She set the picture down beside the lamp. "You do now." That afternoon, the rain let up. They stepped outside, boots squelching in the mud. Silas helped her down to the corral, where Bess, the old mare, stood half asleep. "Still think I'll ride again?" Tala asked, half smiling. Silas handed her the brush. "I know you will." She stroked the horse's neck, slow and steady, the way Silas had taught her. The mare nuzzled her gently in return. "You ever think about leavin'?" she asked. "Startin' fresh, somewhere no one knows your name?" "Thought about it," he said. "But I reckon the land don't forget. You just carry your ghosts to a new patch of dirt." She nodded, as if that made sense to her. That night, they ate beans and cornbread. No meat. Nothing had sprung the traps in 2 days. But Tala didn't complain. She watched the flames dance inside the stove, then turned to him, serious. "If they come," she said, "I don't want to hide." Silas looked at her. Really looked. "You're a kid." "I was," she said. "Not anymore." He didn't argue. Not because he agreed, but because he knew it was true. Then, soft as dust, she added, "You lost your family. I won't lose mine again without a fight." It broke something in him. Not in a bad way, just enough to let the truth through. "You're not alone this time," he said, "and they ain't taking you without a war." Later, after she'd fallen asleep, he sat outside the cabin under the lean-to roof. The rifle lay across his lap again, like it always did. Rain had stopped. Stars peeked through the clouds, one by one. He lit a cigarette, took a slow drag, and stared out toward the ridge. Somewhere out there, Slade Maddox and his men were sniffing for blood. Silas knew the type. Men who took what wasn't theirs and burned what they couldn't carry. He exhaled smoke and hate in equal measure. The girl was right. They wouldn't run. They'd stand. The storm came without warning. Not a weather storm, though thunder still rolled across the sky like God was clearing his throat. This was a storm of truth. The kind that doesn't soak your clothes but drowns your soul if you ain't ready. It started with a question. "You ever been hunted for something you didn't even understand?" Tala asked. Silas was at the workbench, cleaning his rifle, hands methodical, mind on the ridge. He didn't answer at first. Then he looked over, saw the weight in her eyes. "Yeah," he said. "Not for long, but long enough." Tala hesitated, then reached beneath her blanket, pulled something small from the folds of her shirt. A leather pouch, no bigger than a man's palm, tied tight with sinew. "My father gave me this," she said, "before the gunfire started." Silas stood slowly, setting the rifle aside. "Can I see?" She didn't speak, just nodded once and placed the pouch in his calloused hand. He undid the knot, slow and careful, like it might bite. Inside were 3 coins, round but irregular, not like any he'd seen. They shimmered faintly in the firelight, edges worn smooth, symbols barely legible. "Where the hell did these come from?" he muttered. "They were passed down," Tala said. "My great-grandfather called them blood currency. My father said they were worth the lives of many families." Silas's thumb ran over one of the coins. They were heavy, ancient, real in the way gold is real, more than just shiny metal. These were promises made solid. He felt a chill crawl across his spine. "Now I know why Maddox keeps circling," he whispered. "He's not chasing you, he's chasing this." Tala nodded. "They thought we were running with stolen trade. We weren't. We were just trying to keep the pouch hidden." Silas looked up at her, the fire casting shadows across his face. "Do you know what it's worth?" Tala shook her head. "Only that people would kill for it, and my father believed it could buy freedom." Silas tightened the pouch shut, handed it back. "Well," he said, voice grave, "looks like we've got ourselves a war chest." By morning, the air felt different. The kind of stillness that made horses skittish, and men check their guns twice. The kind that said somebody's watching, even if the hills were empty. Amos Croft rode in with hard eyes. "Sheriff spotted Maddox's sign on the North Trail," he said. "They're looking for something, not just burning for fun. Vance thinks they'll hit this ranch within days, maybe less." Silas didn't flinch. "Then we'll be ready." Amos glanced at the cabin where Tala watched from the window, the curtain barely moving. "She worth all this?" the old man asked, voice low. Silas didn't answer with words. He just met Amos's eyes, steady, unmoved, and after a breath, Amos nodded. "I'll stay. But we're outgunned." "We've got the land. We've got heart," Silas said. "That's something Maddox don't." That night, with the wind high and the fire low, Tala sat beside Silas on the cabin floor. The coins lay between them, glinting like ghosts. "You regret finding me?" she asked quietly. Silas didn't speak for a long time. "Every man walks with a weight," he said finally. "For a while mine was made of grief and guilt, but now—" He looked at her. "Not as a child, not as a burden. But now it's a weight I choose to carry." Tala nodded. "Then I'll fight beside you when they come. You'll do no such thing," he muttered, jaw tight. But she didn't back down. "You said yourself I'm not helpless." Silas studied her. And the truth was, he couldn't deny it. "You're getting stronger," he said. "Not just in body. I've had a good teacher." He scoffed, almost smiling. "Flattering a grumpy old ranch hand? That's a dangerous game." She smiled too, soft but real, and for a moment the fear disappeared. Just a man. Just a girl. Sitting on a dirt floor in a worn cabin, waiting on the fire to die. But both knew. This quiet wouldn't last. The storm hadn't passed. It had only just begun. They came just before dusk. The wind had gone still, birds gone quiet, and the horses wouldn't settle. Silas knew what that meant. So did Tala. "They're close," she said, standing by the cabin window, revolver tight in her small hands. Silas loaded the last round into his rifle, checked the hammer. His face didn't change, just his eyes. They went colder. Amos Croft stepped onto the porch, shotgun slung over his shoulder. "Riders on the ridge," he said. "5 I can count. Could be more." Silas didn't move. "Slade Maddox?" "Front and center." That name dropped like lead in a bucket. Slade Maddox wasn't just a raider. He was a devil with a trigger. The kind of man who didn't ask twice. The kind who liked watching hope die in a person's face. He'd come for the girl, and the gold, and whatever was left when he was done. Inside the cabin, Tala adjusted the bandage on her ankle and tucked the leather pouch beneath a loose floorboard. Her hands didn't shake. Silas watched her. "You stay in here," he said. "No matter what." "I won't run," she said. "I ain't asking you to run. I'm asking you to live." She opened her mouth to argue, but stopped when she saw his face. This wasn't about pride. It was about cost. And Silas had already made peace with the price. When the dust trail reached the gate, the first thing Silas saw was Maddox's smile. Wide, yellow, vicious. He sat tall in the saddle, a long coat whipping around him, rifle resting easy on his thigh. Behind him, 4 riders, all killers, every one of them. Maddox didn't call out at first. He just looked at Silas like a man would look at a half-dead dog in the road. Then he spoke. "Afternoon, Kane." Silas didn't flinch. "You're trespassing?" Maddox grinned. "I come for what's mine. Ain't nothing here belongs to you." Maddox dismounted, slow and deliberate. "I think you know better. That little Apache runt. She's holding something. And I don't care what it takes. I will have it." Silas stepped forward, rifle leveled, boots planted in the dirt. "You want her," he said, voice like gravel. "You come through me." The grin dropped off Maddox's face. "Didn't you lose your family already?" he sneered. "You really want to die for someone else's?" Silas didn't blink. "She ain't someone else's anymore." The standoff lasted a breath too long. Then Maddox gave a nod. Gunfire exploded. Amos Croft fired first, knocking one rider clean off his horse. Silas dropped to one knee, returning fire with precision. He didn't waste bullets. Every shot had a name. The men spread out, hooves tearing up dirt, slugs hitting the porch rail and cabin wall. Wood splintered. The air turned thick with smoke and grit. Inside, Tala ducked low, clutching her revolver, heart pounding like war drums. Outside, Silas moved like a man with nothing to lose, only someone to protect. He felt a bullet tear past his shoulder, hot and close. Fired back. One of Maddox's men screamed and went down, then another. But they kept coming. Maddox moved toward the barn, thinking the girl might be inside. Amos tried to cut him off, but he took a bullet to the leg and went down hard. Silas saw red. He charged. Maddox spun, too late. Silas slammed into him, both men hitting the dirt in a tangle of fists and fury. They rolled, kicked, cursed. Maddox swung a knife. Silas caught the blade, hand bleeding, eyes wild. "You fight like a man with nothing left," Maddox spat. "I fight like a man who ain't losing one more damn thing." Then Silas drove his fist into Maddox's jaw, once, twice, until the man went limp. Gunshots still cracked behind him. Silas turned just in time to see the last of Maddox's crew riding off, spooked and bleeding. The dust settled, and in the hush that followed, Silas stood. Bleeding, breathing, still standing. He limped back to the cabin, past Amos, still alive, cursing in pain, and pushed open the door. Tala stood there, revolver still in hand. Her eyes locked on him. "You stayed," she said, voice thick. Silas leaned against the wall, wiped blood from his face. "I told you I would." She moved toward him, slow, then wrapped her arms around his middle and held tight. He didn't stop her, didn't speak, just let her stay there, pressed against him, as the last rays of daylight caught the edge of the broken porch and the scattered shells across the dirt. The sun had barely crawled above the horizon when the second wave came. They weren't scouts this time. They weren't looking to talk. They came for war. Tala was feeding Bess when she heard the first shot tear through the windmill. Wood cracked, iron groaned. The old mare screamed. Silas threw the door open, rifle in one hand, the other dragging Amos. still wounded but cussedly alive, toward cover behind the cabin wall. "They're back," he growled. Tala didn't hesitate. She handed the bucket to the ground and grabbed the spare revolver from the tack hook. Her hands didn't shake this time. She had made her choice. There were more of them now. Twice as many. Maybe more. Bandits on horses, rifles slung, bandanas masking half their faces like they were ghosts of old war. Among them, a big brute named Clay Rourke, Slade Maddox's second, now took charge, and he wasn't out to talk. They wanted the girl, and they wanted revenge. Silas could feel it in his bones. This wasn't just a fight. This was the fight. The first volley of bullets came like a thunderclap. The front of the cabin splintered like matchsticks. Bess screamed again, trapped in the barn as bullets zipped through the boards. Amos fired from behind an old wagon wheel, gritting his teeth as he reloaded with one bloody hand. Silas crouched low beside the window, sighting down his Winchester. Crack. One down. Crack. Another dropped, kicking up dust. But they kept coming. "Back door!" Tala shouted. Silas spun just in time to see two men trying to flank the cabin. He kicked it open and let loose. One fell, the other turned tail. For now. The smell of gunpowder soaked into the wood. The air burned thick. Tala slid beside Silas, eyes fierce. "They'll burn us out. They'll try." He loaded 2 fresh rounds and cocked the lever. The sound came sudden. Glass shattered. A firebomb lobbed through the window. It hit the floor, flames licking the walls like angry fingers. "Barn!" Amos roared from outside. "They're going for the barn!" "Bess!" Tala screamed. Silas grabbed a blanket, smothered the fire, and pushed Tala toward the rear. "Get to the barn. Save her. Don't stop for anything." Tala's eyes widened. "What about you?" "I'll buy time." Tala bolted through the smoke, heart pounding, boots slipping in the dirt. Gunshots cracked overhead, wood splintering around her. She reached the barn just as one of the raiders raised a torch. Her finger pulled the trigger before her mind even caught up. Bang! The man staggered, torch falling useless to the ground. He hit the earth face first, dead before he even knew what hit him. Tala dropped to her knees, unlatched Bess's stall with shaking hands. The horse backed, wild-eyed. "It's me," she whispered, voice soft but strong. "It's okay, we're going home." Meanwhile, Silas was running dry. He'd taken a graze to the arm, another bullet tearing across his side. Blood soaked his shirt, but he stayed upright, firing between each gasp of breath. He wasn't fighting to survive. He was fighting so Tala would. But it was getting worse. They were closing in, and then, one round clipped his leg. His knee buckled. He went down hard in the dirt. The world spun. Dust filled his mouth. Pain throbbed like a war drum. Still he crawled. Still he aimed. Still he fired. Out by the barn, Tala climbed into the saddle, her tiny frame dwarfed by Bess's body. She didn't look like a child anymore. She looked like someone who'd buried innocence and picked up resolve. She guided Bess straight toward the cabin. She saw Silas, bloodied, crawling, still firing. She didn't think. She pulled up beside him, revolver raised. One bandit aimed his rifle. Tala didn't blink. Bang. The man crumpled. Silas looked up at her, dazed. She offered her hand. "I ain't leaving you." He took it. Together they got behind cover. Amos, barely standing, gave them a nod. And then the last of the bandits retreated, confused, leaderless, spooked by the girl who wouldn't fall and the man who wouldn't die. When the dust cleared, 3 bodies lay cold in the yard. Another 2 limped away into the trees. The rest disappeared over the ridge. Tala dismounted, trembling, and knelt beside Silas. "You all right?" she whispered. Silas managed a grin, blood in his teeth. "Remind me never to doubt you again." She held his hand tight. They didn't speak for a long while, just sat in the dirt, wounded and breathing, with the sun crawling higher behind them, casting long shadows over the blood-stained ground. The kind of silence only born from survival. The battle had ended, but the war left echoes. Smoke drifted from the burned edges of the barn. The wind carried a strange silence, one that rang too loud after the roar of gunfire. Somewhere behind the hills, a hawk cried, distant and lonesome. Tala sat on the porch steps, blood smeared on her cheek, Silas's revolver still in her grip. She wasn't crying, she wasn't shaking, she was listening. Inside the cabin, Silas lay on the cot, leg bandaged tight with Amos's belt. His breath was shallow, and the color had drained from his face. "I'm fine," he muttered through clenched teeth, voice rasped like gravel. "Just a scratch." Amos barked a dry laugh. "You call that a scratch, Kane? I'd hate to see what you call a gut shot." Tala didn't laugh. She stood, quiet as the wind, and walked to the barn. Bess nickered at her softly, like the old mare knew something had shifted. Tala ran a hand along her mane and stared out across the range. And then she did something no one expected. She walked back inside, reached up to the mantel where Silas kept his father's hat, and placed it on her head. The fit wasn't perfect, but the choice was. Later that evening, Amos sat on the porch cleaning his rifle when he heard a sound. Footsteps, soft but certain. He looked up to see Tala, dressed in Silas's old duster, the brim of that hat casting a long shadow over her young face. "What are you doing with that iron?" he asked, nodding toward the revolver on her hip. She didn't blink. "Protecting what's mine." Amos studied her for a beat, then nodded. "Good. 'Cause there's more of 'em out there. Maddox may be gone, but snakes don't die easy. They slither." That night, while Silas drifted in and out of sleep, Tala sat by the window. She kept watch without being asked. The stars burned cold and bright. Coyotes howled from the hills. She didn't flinch. When dawn broke, she saddled Bess and rode out, alone. She tracked the blood trails from the day before, what was left of Maddox's men dragging their wounded through the brush. She moved like smoke, low, swift, unseen. An hour in, she spotted two of them, one limping, the other leaning on him, both too tired to notice the girl watching from the trees. Her hands trembled. Only a little. She aimed. And then she didn't pull the trigger. Not yet. Instead, she tied off a piece of red cloth from her coat and left it on a tree near their trail. A warning. Not from Silas. From Tala Kane. By the time she returned to the cabin, the sun was climbing high. Amos was tending to the fire. Silas was half propped up on the cot, trying to drink coffee without spilling it. "You look like hell," she said, not unkindly. Silas grinned. "So do you." She sat beside him, and for a long moment they didn't speak. Then she reached into her coat pocket and handed him something. It was her father's pouch, the leather worn smooth, the drawstring frayed. He opened it slowly. The coins inside still gleamed, ancient, heavy, full of stories. "She told me to protect it," Tala said. "Said it's worth more than silver." "It is," Silas said, voice thick. "Because it's yours." She looked him in the eye. "It's ours now." Later, as the sun sank and shadows grew long across the land, Silas limped out onto the porch. Tala was already there, carving something into the wood beam. He squinted, then smiled. It was a name. Cain. Big. Bold. Permanent. "You sure?" he asked. She nodded once. "I chose it." He put an arm around her shoulder. She didn't pull away. That night, the cabin didn't feel like a tomb anymore. It felt like a beginning. The storm had passed, but the land hadn't caught its breath yet. Smoke curled from the blackened barn timbers, and the earth still bore scars from boots and bullets. Bess limped gently in the pasture, a fresh bandage around her leg, while the chickens clucked warily, unsure if the morning sun meant peace or more gunfire. Silas Cain leaned heavy on a makeshift crutch, the bandage around his thigh soaked with sweat and grit. Every step was a jolt of pain, but he didn't complain. His eyes stayed fixed on Tala, who moved about the cabin like she'd always belonged there. She swept ashes from the hearth, rebuilt the corral gate, saddled Bess with care and purpose. There was something about her now, steel under the skin. She didn't flinch when the wind banged the shutters. She didn't startle when a hawk cried overhead. She'd looked death in the eye, and it had blinked first. "Sheriff's expectin' us," Amos said, tightening the last strap on his saddle. "Ledger needs settlin' after what happened. Town don't know if we're the heroes or the fools." Silas nodded. "Guess we better give him an answer." Tala stepped out onto the porch, Silas's father's hat still perched on her head. She wore it like armor now, not memory. "You ready?" Silas asked. She didn't answer with words, just climbed into the saddle like she'd been born to it. They rode into town slow, real slow. 3 horses, 3 riders, the battered ghost of a mare in front, a grizzled rancher at the rear, and in the center, Silas Cain and the girl who no longer hid behind him. Dust kicked up beneath their hooves as folks stepped out of shops, squinting through the noonday sun. Old Man Foster stopped stacking crates. The widow Langley dropped her spoon mid-stir. Even the saloon piano trailed off into silence. All eyes went to Tala. She sat tall, face calm, shoulders square. That duster swallowed her frame, but somehow it didn't look borrowed anymore. It looked earned. Sheriff Vance met them at the steps of the town hall. He wore a clean shirt, but his eyes were rimmed red from 2 nights without sleep. "Silas," the lawman nodded. "Heard about Maddox. Town owes you." Silas shrugged. "Don't owe me, but there's someone else you might want to speak with." Vance turned his eyes to Tala. He cleared his throat, pulled a leather-bound ledger from under his arm, and flipped it open. "For the record," he said, voice firm but kind, "we need her name. For the incident, for the grave markers, for the record books." Silas looked at her, letting her decide. Tala slid down from Bess, brushed the dust from her trousers, and stepped forward. Vance crouched slightly, pen poised. "What's your name, miss?" The square was silent. Even the wind seemed to wait. Her voice rang out, steady as a church bell. "Tala. Tala Cain." There was no tremor in it, no question, just truth. Vance blinked, looked between her and Silas, then nodded and scratched it down in ink. "Welcome to the county, Miss Cain." From the saloon, someone clapped. A single pair of hands, then 2 more joined, then a cheer. It wasn't thunderous, but it was enough. Later, as the sun dipped low and painted the street in gold and blood, they walked together past the general store. The folks who once stared at Tala with suspicion now tipped hats, offered nods. "Feels different," she said, her eyes scanning the storefronts. "It is," Silas replied. "You got a name now. That carries weight." She paused outside the blacksmith's, watching him hammer metal like it was nothing. You think they'll ever forget I'm Apache? No, he said plainly. But they'll remember your cane, too. That night, back on the porch, she sat beside him with the pouch of coins in her lap. I ain't running, she said. Silas looked at her. I know. I want to build. Use this for something good, something ours. He nodded, slow and proud. Then we start tomorrow. She leaned her head on his shoulder. For once, she let herself be the kid she was. Just for a minute. Spring came slow that year. The rains hit late, washing the blood and soot off the land like the desert itself wanted to forget. Grass pushed through the ashes, green and stubborn. The ranch that once felt like a graveyard began to look like something living again. Silas Kane limped across the yard, sun in his eyes, hammer in hand. His leg would never heal right, but he reckoned that was fair. Some scars are meant to stay, reminders of the things worth fighting for. Behind him, Tala was painting the porch rail white. The strokes were uneven, the brush dripping. But she didn't seem to care. Her laugh, light and rare, drifted through the air like the sound of home. Amos Croft leaned against the fence, watching them with a smirk. You two keep at it, and this place might even start looking respectable again. Silas grinned. Don't go ruining our reputation, Amos. Folks might expect manners next. Amos chuckled, tipped his hat, and rode off toward town. The ranch was quiet again, except for the creak of the boards and the distant call of meadowlarks. Tala set the brush down, stepping beside Silas to admire their work. You ever think we'd get here? She asked softly. He took a breath, looking out over the fields. Didn't think I'd get anywhere, truth be told. She looked up at him, her eyes catching the same fire she had the day he found her by the mine. But softer now. Steady. We made it, she said. Yeah, he murmured. We did. That evening, Sheriff Vance rode in, wearing his Sunday coat and carrying a folded paper in hand. Got something for you, he said, handing it to Silas. Town council voted this morning. Deed's yours. The ranch is officially under your name. Silas unfolded it, slow. Across the bottom, written in bold ink, it read, Tanner Creek Ranch. Owners, Silas and Tala Kane. Tala blinked, stunned. Both our names? Vance smiled. Seems the council figured one Kane ain't much without the other. She didn't speak, just reached for Silas's hand. He squeezed back, rough palm to soft skin. Appreciate it, Sheriff, Silas said. Don't thank me, Vance replied. You two earned it. He tipped his hat and rode off, leaving a long trail of dust behind him. As the sound of hooves faded, Tala turned toward Silas. You remember what you told me that first day? She asked. He squinted, pretending not to. I said a lot of foolish things back then. Her smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. You said, you just grow up strong, little one, and I'll marry you someday. Silas chuckled, shaking his head. I was trying to make a scared kid laugh. Maybe, she said, but maybe you were telling the truth and didn't know it yet. At dusk, they stood on that same porch where so much had begun. Amos and Sheriff Vance stood as witnesses, dust on their boots, hats in hand. The sky burned orange behind them, a wash of light over the land that had seen too much death to stay quiet forever. Tala wore her mother's beads, the ones she'd fixed herself. Silas wore his father's old vest, patched and frayed at the seams. No preacher, no church, just two souls, and the land that raised them hard and didn't break them. When the vows were spoken, it wasn't about promises. It was about survival, about choosing to stay when walking away would have been easier. Vance closed the book and nodded. By the power vested in me by Apache County, I pronounce you man and wife. For a moment, no one moved. Then Silas reached out, took her hands, and said the words that had lived in his chest for years. I ain't much good with speeches, but you gave me back something I thought I'd buried. You made this place feel like home again. Tala smiled through her tears. You gave me a name worth carrying. That night, the porch lamp burned long after the stars came out. The wind moved soft through the grass, and the world, for once, felt gentle. Silas sat with his arm around Tala, both of them quiet, watching lightning bugs flicker out over the pasture. You reckon peace like this lasts? She asked. Silas took a long look at the horizon, the shadows, the memory of every fight that brought them here. Not forever, he said, but maybe long enough. She nodded, resting her head against his shoulder. Then that's enough for me. And so it was. 2 ghosts in the wasteland, no longer haunted but home. Final reflection for the audience. In a land where mercy is rare and love has to be fought for, do you think redemption is ever truly earned, or does it have to be chosen over and over again? If this story stirred something in you, don't ride off just yet. There are more tales out here in the dust, waiting to be found.